What scares me?
Sorry. Sorry if I startled anyone. Good afternoon. I'll call to order this
Only
regularly.
Monday.
Right. Sorry. This regularly scheduled Community Development Committee meeting of the Metropolitan Council for March 18th, 2024. I'm the chair, Councilmember Robert Lilligren, joined by a quorum of the committee. And just a couple things before we get started. Committee members, we have kind of a small attendance. I think we're probably going to be joined by at least one more. And also, Councilmember Lindstrom let us know earlier, he has a sick kid at home, so he's going to want to leave after the action items that we vote on. And also, Councilmember Carter wants to attend a transit recognition event in her district, and so she may be stepping out after the business items as well. We also have some pithy information items on the agenda, so I'm hoping we can get to them. This committee gets very chatty at times, and that's good. That's what we're here for. And but it would be nice if we can make it through the information items today. Fingers crossed. Great. So I'll turn to the agenda. The first is approval of the agenda. If committee members have any suggestions for changes, hearing none, we have an agenda. Next is approval of the minutes for the Community Development Committee of March 4th, 2024, and I'd entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Councilmembers Wolf and Carter. Any discussion, additions, corrections? Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Those minutes are approved. We'll move on to our consent agenda. 3 items: Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund Awards and a Land Use Tax Comprehensive Plan Amendment for the City of Arden Hills. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Great. Second? Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. That was a kind of a photo finish between Councilmembers Johnson and Lindstrom. Michelle, take your pick. All right. Hearing no discussion, all in approval of the consent agenda, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. We are on to our non-consent business item. It's item 2024-71, City of North Oaks Red Forest Way South Comprehensive Plan Amendment Modification. We will have a presentation from staff. I see Ms. Torres and Mr. Wojchik making their way forward. Then committee members, if you have questions, I'll just remind folks, we've seen this before. It's been presented once, presented again with our public hearing. So this isn't a public hearing, but I do see representatives from the City of North Oaks here. So if committee members have questions, I'm sure they're on hand to respond, or questions of our staff. So turning to the presentation and the response to some of the public comments, I will look to Ms. Torres and Mr. Wojchik. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Lilligren and committee members. Thank you for the introduction. Appreciate that. I'm Angela Torres, Senior Manager of Local Planning Assistance, and I'm here with Eric Wojchik, Planning Analyst of District and Sector Rep for District 10, which includes the City of North Oaks. We're here to talk about the North Oaks Red Forest Way Comprehensive Plan Amendment proposed plan modification. I'll share a bit about the process, and then Eric will talk about the specifics of the amendment proposed, including the public comment report, and then we'll both be available for questions. Oh, my goodness. The Council's role in comprehensive planning is outlined in the Metropolitan Land Planning Act. Per statute, the Council reviews and comments on the comprehensive plans of local governments prepared and submitted pursuant to sections 473.851 to 473.871. I don't often refer to statute, but we're talking about the Metropolitan Land Planning Act, so I thought I would mention that. We do that to determine the compatibility with each other, plans with each other, and conformity of the plans with metropolitan system plans. The Council shall review and comment on the apparent consistency of the comprehensive plans with adopted plans of the Council. Council staff works with local governments to ensure that they conform to the Council's plans and are consistent with the Council policies. We provide tools like the Local Planning Handbook, individual technical assistance like sector representatives. We conduct workshops and provide many other tools, resources, and other things to help local governments conform to regional plans, and the vast majority do. On the rare occasions that a plan does not conform to regional plans, there's a process outlined in statute called plan modification. The Council may require a local unit of government to modify its comprehensive plan or part thereof that does not conform to a metropolitan system plan if the Council concludes that the local plan or plan amendment is more likely than not to have either a substantial impact on or to represent a substantial departure from the council's adopted policy plans and capital budgets for the metropolitan system. Our system plans for transportation, wastewater, and regional parks all define what it means to conform to the regional system plan and what constitutes a substantial impact or departure from that plan. In this case, the system at issue is the regional wastewater system. The plan modification process is mostly represented in the timeline shown here. A public hearing is required. Staff requested to set a public hearing at the January 16th CDC meeting where we provided an introduction to the plan modification process and outlined the amendment as it was proposed. The public hearing was held on March 4th. The public hearing remained open to public comment until March 13th. Today, we'll review the staff report and public hearing report, which Eric will walk through. Included in the staff report is a recommendation for final action and a draft resolution, which is proposed to be reviewed at the Met Council meeting on March 27th. The staff overview outlined the Metropolitan Land Planning Act process, and the staff report outlines the council analysis and review of the conformance issues. The public hearing provided an opportunity for the city and other interested parties to present comments. All comments are included in the public hearing report in your staff report. I'll pause here to answer any questions about the process before Eric describes the specific issues at hand with the proposed amendment.
Thank you, Ms. Torres. Questions on the process or what Ms. Torres has presented? Any questions? Hearing none, Mr. Wojchik, welcome.
Thank you, Chair Lilligren. Just to point out, this report is different than ones you've seen previously for amendments. So I'll be walking you through some of the page locations and where some of the attachments are within the report because it is a little bit more extensive. It's 80 pages in length, all in. That public hearing section actually appears on page 33 of the PDF, which is attachment 6, if you wanted to have a look at that at some point. But I'll jump right into the system considerations at hand for this amendment. A lot of this material we reviewed previously. Just wanted to show here that the location for this development, the 72.2 acres and 24 sewer connections, is actually fairly close to the regional interceptor that runs along the east side of the city. So in terms of proximity, it is fairly close. But this area is currently not within the Metropolitan Urban Service area, so it's unsewered part of the city. And you'll see from a future slide that I'll talk through the community designations. The background of this amendment, again, we talked about this last time, but the city's been very clear in their public hearing as well that the city is unique in a lot of ways, and I think that it's important to recognize that fact. Nearly all of the land within the city, with few exceptions, is governed by the North Oaks Homeowners Association. Perpetual covenants are part of the deeds and declarations since 1950, except for only a few properties. Some neighborhoods include sub-associations that have more restrictive provisions, but they remain subordinate to the overall HOA. All roads of the city, in the city are private, and local utilities are the responsibility of the HOAs. Since 1999, the primary governing, planning, and regulatory document for the city is the East Oaks Planned Unit Development, and I'll refer to this jointly as either the PUD or the PDA. You see it kind of referred to both ways in the city's documentation. The amendment details, again, just to remind you, proposes an expansion of the MUSA to include properties within the Red Forest Way South development. This would be 23 parcels, but 24 sewer connections across 72.2 acres. It states that the purpose is to connect these parcels to the regional sanitary sewer. And this would also require a change of community designation from rural residential to emerging suburban edge community designation. So the city is also requesting that change. And it reduces the city's community-wide planned density from 3.0 units per acre to 2.3 units per acre with this amendment. The proposed density of this particular development is around 0.33 units per acre. Here's that community designation map to kind of orient you. You can see here that the area in green is rural residential. So that's rural residential community designation that consists of 2.5 to 3 acre lots for the most part on septic systems. That whole area in green is unsewered. The areas on the edge of the community are the emerging suburban edge or sewered part of the city. And you can see that this subdivision that's proposed to be connected to the sewer is quite close to that area on the east side that is sewered. This map is taken from the city's 2040 comprehensive plan, and again, this shows that there's a lot of septic systems in the city, over 1,200 septic systems, and you can see them mapped out there with the little black dots, and you can see the area on the edges in orange that are sewered, and you can see the area in question kind of in a hatch color on the east side of the city. The community designation and density, the minimum requirements. The rural residential designation does not allow for provision of regional sewer services. This is in regional policy. To extend sewer service, there must be a community designation change from rural residential to emerging suburban edge. Emerging suburban edge communities are required to plan at minimum densities of between 3 to 5 units per acre. And the inconsistency with the emerging suburban edge minimum density requirements precludes the community designation change in this instance. The proposal does not conform to regional system plan for wastewater and represents a substantial departure from the council's adopted 2040 Water Resources Policy Plan. The Water Resources Policy Plan defines a substantial departure as when communities plan for sewer development densities that are lower than council density standards and are the basis for regional infrastructure planning purposes. The system plan for regional wastewater services does not include or foresee an extension of regional sewer service to this area within the planning horizon or beyond. The reduction in the city's community-wide plan density from 3.0 units per acre to 2.3 units per acre is inconsistent with regional land use policy, including the required minimum density for emerging suburban edge community designation. I won't spend too much time on this slide other than to say that when the city's 2040 plan was adopted, it was inconsistent with housing policy, and this does not make the inconsistency worse, but the city is still inconsistent with housing policy. And this is just to say that, we have been trying to work with the city on this over the course of close to a year at this point, I believe. We've kind of floated some options here to resolve some of these conformance and consistency issues related to the amendment. First of which is to develop, as authorized within the 2040 plan, on individual septic systems within the current rural residential community designation, so the city can choose that path to install septic systems for these 24 units. Alternatively, the city could identify areas within the sewered portions of the city to increase plan densities to retain an overall minimum 3.0 units per acre required density for new development and redevelopment areas. So in this instance, we do have communities in some cases where they are actually developing sometimes a particular subdivision below 3 units per acre, but they might offset that with higher densities in another portion of the city, because what we look at is community-wide net density. And then thirdly, revise the amendment to propose densities consistent with sewer densities within the emerging suburban edge community designation. So that would be developing at the required minimum of 3 to 5 units per acre for suburban edge community designation. I can pause briefly for questions before jumping into the public hearing findings. I'm probably going to go a little bit slower through this part just because I want to kind of talk you through how the Met Council staff have considered what we heard at the public hearing and our response to those considerations.
Thank you, Mr. Wojchik. Any questions on what Mr. Wojcik's presented to this point? Questions? Hearing none, Mr. Wojcik.
Great. And I recognize you've heard all of that before. So the city lays out a series of arguments within the public hearing, and the public hearing really consisted of what you heard here on March 4th, but it also consists of other additional comments that were received between March 4th and the closing of the public hearing on March 13th. Some of those comments were from third parties, city representatives, the North Oaks Company. So I would have, I'm going to kind of walk you through some of that, but I would also encourage you to look at some of the content within that public hearing at the back of your report. The city lays out an argument around precedent, mainly being that there are unique characteristics within North Oaks, given its history and the perpetual deeds and declaration covenants, and that the infrastructure is built by the North Oaks Company and maintained by the residents and the HOA, and is not really within the purview of city authority. So it can be challenging for the city to do certain things because the company and the HOA are really doing a lot of the planning and maintenance and development within the city. Met Council takes the view that, that all council must apply its policies, plans, and guidelines consistently. If the 3.0 units per acre minimum density threshold is no longer the minimum that is held for communities in the emerging suburban edge community designation, it creates an undefined new policy for determining conformance for the wastewater system that opens the door for communities across the metro to propose new and lower densities. And that would also apply for potentially future requests for sewer in other parts of North Oaks. They could also argue that their community is unique and therefore they should be able to connect to the sewer in other locations as well. The council's authorization of the city's 2040 plan and the city's subsequent adoption of that plan replaces and supersedes all past plans. We put that response in there because the city had stated that we had made previous agreements that the entire city would be sewered. I couldn't find any of those on record, but what we do have is a 2040 plan that is adopted by the city and authorized by the Met Council that does not include this area within the sewered portion of the city, and it does not make any promises to sewer this area. And then finally, if the city is bound by deeds and covenants, it could delay development of this area until the expiration of the agreement in 2029 to accommodate growth at sewer densities consistent with regional policy and in conformance with system plans. And I will note that, I don't know how difficult it is to change the agreement that the city has, but it has amended it 9 times since 1999. So it has amended the agreement for various reasons. So it could potentially consider amending it as well, not just waiting for that 2029 period. I don't know how difficult that is, of course. Next slide, we talk about environmental protection. The city makes some interesting points about how it was designed with the intent to protect the environment, and I don't disagree with that statement. I think that there was some forward thinking at that time. Certainly, regional sewer was not available when the city was firstly kind of planned out. But when you look at a development like this, there's different ways of thinking about environmental protection. The first point, which I think is probably the most important, is that to achieve a density of 3 dwelling units per acre in this location, the city could develop on a mere 8 acres of land. So to achieve that 3 units per acre, they would actually be able to potentially preserve a further 64 acres of land, potentially in environmental protection status if they wanted to. Because this is how big these lots are. They're averaging 3 units and more in size. Alternatively, if you did develop on 72.2 acres at a development density of 3 units per acre, that would actually create the potential for an additional 192 units. So depending on if you're thinking of environmental protection or the number of housing units, it shows how low the density is in this proposed development. The council allows for opportunities to connect to urban services to protect the environment when there are failing septic systems. We do have some provision for that. The city makes the argument that less residential units on septic is good for the environment. We wouldn't necessarily disagree with that point, although we know that when septics are kept well maintained and they're new, they don't necessarily pose a huge threat to the environment. As they degrade over time, that does become a bigger problem. That environmental impact increases when SSTS get older and maintenance is deferred. To maximize long-term environmental protection in this location, the city and the company could delay development or use other legal mechanisms, like I mentioned earlier, by amending the agreement to increase density in this location to support provision of urban services consistent with regional policy and the 2040 Water Resources Policy Plan. And then finally, I just wanted to make a point that the city mentioned that they have a lot of land in environmental conservation status, which again is laudable, and we think that's good practice. However, in terms of how we calculate net density for residential developments, that land needs to be in public ownership, but also accessible to the public. And in this case, within the city of North Oaks, that land is not publicly accessible because you must be accompanied by a member of the community to access that land. So that's why we cannot include parkland within the city within our density calculation. The city also talks about the St. Paul water system protection. They mention protecting groundwater and drinking water is essential for the St. Paul public water system, providing drinking water for 446,000 customers in 14 cities. And the city uses the argument of septic systems being potentially bad for water supply. Again, we don't necessarily disagree with that point. However, the installation of 24 new SSTS in this location in line with state standards and requirements does not represent an environmental risk to the St. Paul water system. There are provisions within council guidelines, again, that allow for the connection to the regional wastewater system in the case of verification of failed septic systems. The amendment under consideration does not meet those guidelines. Our second point here is that the council sets conformance standards for connection to the regional system, and the city is welcome to work with the council on achieving those standards, be that through increased density in this location or increased density in other portions of the city to offset lower density in this location. The city has not expressed an interest in either of those options, and the city has only expressed the desire to use some of the council's policies and goals without having to follow any accompanying policies that would require a different development pattern for the city. The city also lays out whether or not this is in fact a substantial departure given the number of connections. Does it constitute a substantial departure? Council staff disagree with this. The amendment is inconsistent with regional land use policy and constitutes a conformance issue reflecting a substantial departure from the regional wastewater system plan due to the planned underutilization of the system. And then in terms of Met Council authority, I just put that second bullet in there just stating that there's court precedent that shows that the council can revise its local comprehensive plans. The council empowers the council to revise local comprehensive plans that are in conflict with the council's overarching plan. Just kind of demonstrating that that authority is not only in law, it's also in case law. Page 67 of the city's 2040 comprehensive plan states for future developments in the East Oaks PUD area, the subdivider may utilize centralized sanitary sewer depending on sewer accessibility and sewer line capabilities. The city cites this as justification and rationale for connection in this location. However, council staff feel that this statement does not verify that the city can connect to the regional system in this location. So the statement clearly references sewer accessibility and sewer line capacities. And then finally, the city's 2040 comprehensive plan shows that this area as being without sewer service throughout the planning horizon. And this is the final point. So we're getting to the end, and I apologize for the length of this. I just wanted to take time on this. The city mentions that the Metropolitan Council has the legal authority to approve the city's requested amendment despite the plan modification process. The council's response to that is that 24 sewer connections on 72.2 acres of land constitutes a substantial departure from the wastewater system plan. As shown in Table 1, this represents a density for the development of 0.33 units per acre on an average lot size of 3 acres per residential unit. The development pattern in Red Forest Way South is consistent with a rural residential development pattern, which is a development pattern that precludes the provision of urban services by virtue of the need for extensive infrastructure to connect disparate properties. And Thrive is quite clear on rural residential policy. Rural residential development does not advance the council mission of ensuring orderly and economical development, and in some cases increases the potential for damage to the environment. Given the large acreage and the low number of housing units, the city would either need to plan for an additional 192 housing units to achieve a density of 3 dwelling units per acre in this location, or reduce the acreage used by the proposed 24 units so that it only covered 8 acres. Using 64 fewer acres to support the proposed 24 units would also achieve the city's stated objective of environmental protection by using less land. And then finally, the proposed action before you today is that the Metropolitan Council adopt Resolution 2024-5, that's attachment 5 in your packet, that the proposed amendment does not conform to the Metropolitan System Plan for wastewater and requiring the City of North Oaks to modify its comprehensive plan amendment. And then secondly, transmit to the City of North Oaks Table 3 required changes to the 2040 North Oaks Comprehensive Plan. That's on PDF page 31 of your packet. And then finally, notify the city that it may not put its Red Forest Way South Comprehensive Plan amendment into effect unless and until the plan or the amendment is modified as described in the resolution and this business item, and the council formally reviews the document. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wojchik, Ms. Torres, and thanks to your teams for your work on this, for sure. Committee members, questions for staff? Questions on the report? Any questions? Or discussion? Councilmember Lindstrom.
Not a question, but just some discussion. First of all, I want to thank everybody, the city and staff for coming to these discussions in good faith. And I also want to thank the city for being good stewards of the water that so many of us rely on, especially on the east side. Mr. Chair, I think over the last 5 years or so, and folks on this committee that have been here for a while, I think we have heard the terms conformance and consistency and compatibility again and again and again when we have comp plans come before us or amendments come before us. And usually they are saying that this plan conforms, this plan is compatible, this plan is consistent. And the reason why we're always hearing this is because staff has worked with the local government again and again and again to get to a point where it's ready to be presented to us. This, unfortunately, I believe the amendment plan modification that we're looking at today does not conform with the council's plan. I think it's a pretty clear example of non-conformance. So it makes me want to think, well, why do we have these plans in place in the first place? Well, we do so to make sure that our regional system has adequate capacity to serve the plan development in the right location at the right time. This review also helps us to ensure that we're being good stewards of the regional investment in our wastewater infrastructure by getting the most out of our infrastructure. And as we just heard, the proposal is a connection at 0.33 units per acre, bringing the community-wide density down to 2.3 units per acre. And this, in my view, is underutilization of our wastewater regional system. Being good stewards of ratepayer money means that we fully utilize our regional system. Councilmember Carter, I think it was you that asked a month or so ago, do we ever make exceptions? And the answer was no. Are we flexible? Yeah, absolutely. As we heard just a few minutes ago, we could say, well, your proposal isn't compatible, but if you do this, it would be compatible. Or if you think about this other thing, it could be compatible. The city does have options. and including, as we just heard, waiting a few years until the PDA expires to develop this land. And it could be developed in a way that does conform with system plans and is consistent with regional policy. I hope that's the path they take in 5 years, which in the life of a city is a blink of an eye. It does make sense that eventually it would be sewered because septic systems fail and proximity to the sewer infrastructure, but it doesn't make sense at the proposed density that we're hearing about today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lindstrom, for your thoughtful comments. Any other comments or questions? Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Being just a few units, maybe it doesn't feel like it matters on a regional scale, but we have very, very many places around the region where people have done 2.5 or 3 acre lots with septic systems, and then those septic systems fail, and we've asked people not to do that. Do 10 acres or 3 units per acre and not anything in between there, because 10 acres you can redevelop in a economical fashion. The dollars work. Doing it at 3 units per acre, the dollars work, but that in between is really hard to redevelop or to cover the cost of the infrastructure to connect those kinds of developments. And we're going to be seeing more and more places around the region that chose to do something different in that in-between density, that their septic systems are failing, and it's going to cost a whole lot of money now to hook them up if we do. And everybody's going to want, if we make one exception, everybody's going to want that exception. And we can't do that everywhere. I've always tried to look at things at, like when I was on the city council, we didn't do variances, ever. You either changed the rule so that everybody could do it if it was reasonable to do, or you said, no, we can't do that. And I feel like we need to keep that same consistency here with our wastewater policy of, if it's okay for everybody to do, great. If it's not okay for everybody to do, then we have to say no. It's hard. I know people might not want to hear that, but we need to treat everybody the same, and this would not be treating everybody the same.
Thank you, Councilmember. Further discussion? Any questions? If not, I'll note that staff has proposed that the Metropolitan Council adopt Resolution 24-5, finding that the proposed amendment does not conform to the Metropolitan Systems Plan for wastewater and requiring the City of North Oaks to modify its comprehensive plan amendment. 2, transmit to the City of North Oaks Table 3 required changes to the 2040 North Oaks Comprehensive Plan. And 3, notify the city that it may not put its Red Forest Way South Comprehensive Plan amendment into effect unless and until the plan or the amendment is modified as described in the resolution and this business item, and the council formally reviews the document. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, was that you, Councilmember Lee? Thank you, Councilmembers Lindstrom and Lee. Yeah, thank you, Michelle. Any discussion on the motion? Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one other thing. I have not been able to get the info item part of that to open on
Either could I. Yes.
iPad or my iPad. I read it at home on a desktop, but there's something wrong with that file.
Okay.
You know, I'm glad I read it at home so I could
Same
actually
here,
read
right.
it, but it needs to be fixed as soon as possible because people are going to want to look at that before the council meeting as well.
And it's like Director Baraha has a comment.
Mr. Chair, council members, I had the same issue. Comes up fine on my computer, which I have upstairs. Just looked at it before coming here. We'll look into that. We probably just have to break it up. It's a big file.
Thanks for that note, Councilmember Wolf, and that instruction, Director Barajas, and I had the same experience. I could open it at home. I couldn't open it here. Well, further discussion on the motion. Further discussion. Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries. Thank you very much. Mr. Wojchik, Ms. Torres, thank you very much to the representatives from North Oaks. And for your time and attention, I look forward to future partnership here. Council members, I know we might lose a few of you here now that we've completed our business, but we'll move on to our information items. And the first is a Metro HRA 2023 in review and 2024 work plan. And we have Chong and Terri Smith here to present. Welcome.
Good afternoon, council members. Mr. Chair, I'm Terri Smith. I'm the director of the council's HRA. I'm here with my colleague Chong, an HRA manager, and we're going to share some information with you today on our some work we did in 2023, and then some big work plan items we have in 2024, and this will include information on the project-based voucher program. So I will just start out here just to sort of ground us in our conversation today and remind us of the mission of the Metro HRA, which is to provide decent, safe, and affordable housing opportunities, to encourage housing choice throughout the region, including areas of high opportunity, and to foster family stability and promote self-sufficiency for people of low wealth. You've seen this map lots of times, but just a reminder that the Metro HRA service area includes all of Carver County, all of Carver County, all of Anoka County, and then suburban Hennepin and Ramsey. So we provide housing choice voucher rent assistance to almost 7,300 families through 9 different programs. In 2023, we distributed $81 million for the housing choice voucher program in payments to 1,400 private landlords. I have a couple slides on 2023 outcomes to share some information with you. And this is for our large program, the Housing Choice Voucher Program. In 2023, we achieved 99% voucher utilization rate. So we're excited about that. This resulted from the disbursement of almost 86,000 rent payments to, again, the 1,400 landlords. In terms of filling turnover vouchers, and I'll share more on a future slide on turnover vouchers, but we selected almost 450 applicants from our waiting list. We completed 234 voucher absorbs, so absorbed 234 into our own program, which again I'll talk about in a future slide as well. We processed 771 port-ins, so those are people moving to our service area from other areas of the region, the state, or the country. Higher number than ever before. Our average number of port-ins is 600. And of those, 520% leased up successfully, which is a great number. We spent 95% of our HUD funds that were awarded last year. That seems low, but when you consider we had a $1.5 million carryover from 2022 subsidy dollars, and then we also received a payment from HUD of $2.3 million, which was shortfall funds from 2022, which we didn't end up needing, but they gave it to us anyway. And so without those two carryovers and shortfall, we would have been close to spending 100% of our funds. And again, about $81 million in subsidy distribution. Congress just passed the HUD portion of the federal budget on Friday, and so we're excited that that finally happened from the fiscal year start of October 1st. And so actually I read something over the weekend. It's been since 1990 since Congress has passed the HUD budget on time. So we never have a budget before the year starts, so we're 3 months into our year and still don't know how much money we're going to get, but do have some tools that help us predict, and we think we're gonna get about $85 million for the Housing Choice Voucher Program this year, which is great and will allow us to serve and issue all of our vouchers. I wonder if we're out of batteries.
Greg, can you advance the slide, please? It seems like the remote has gone offline.
Oh. There
Was
we
that
go.
you, Terry, or
I'm
was
not
that?
sure. I'm not sure. So the Housing Authority administers, in the beginning I said we have 9 different programs. These are some of our special purpose vouchers that were awarded by HUD to serve certain populations. The first bucket there is our emergency housing voucher program, serves people experiencing homelessness, and those vouchers were awarded during the pandemic. We reached 98% utilization of those in 2023, which we are pretty excited about. I think the national average is around 80%, so we're well above the national average for that. Mainstream vouchers, we ended the year at 96% utilized, and these are also vouchers that serve people experiencing homelessness, living with disabilities. And this is also the program where we have a partnership with the Metro Transit Homeless Action Team. So towards the end of the year, there were several people that went off that program, and we now have shoppers getting ready to lease up so that that can get to 100% again. Veterans Affairs Supportive Housing is a program we've had for many years. It's a partnership with the Minneapolis Department of Veterans Affairs. So we provide the rent subsidy and the VA provides referrals and supports for veterans experiencing homelessness. And we've received additional VASH vouchers most years since about 2012. Last year was the first year we didn't take additional vouchers and really want to focus with the VA on getting this program full before we ask for more vouchers. And I think we make some progress and then a few veterans go off the program and we go backwards again. So we're really having some intentional discussions with the VA to get that program full. Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS, that's another federal program. Minneapolis, the city of Minneapolis is the grantee for that program, and we're a sub-grantee. We don't think of utilization in terms of percentages for this program. We're awarded certain funds, and then we serve as many families as possible with the program funding. So we're currently serving 56 households and are spending all the funds for that program. In fact, they're giving us more money now because they had additional HUD grant money, and so we're going to be increasing the number of households served through that program. Foster Youth to Independence is a brand new program that we have, and it is working with foster youth that are aging out of foster care and that are at risk of homelessness. We only have 11 vouchers, so 1 or 2 vouchers can make a big difference in that program in terms of percentage utilized, so that looks like a low percent. We had a few young people that were working with the child protection workers and that fell off the radar and lost contact, so now we're getting more referrals. But as soon as we get 90% utilized on that program, we can request some more vouchers, and we're ready to do that on behalf of some of the counties in our service area. And then the Family Unification Program is another program where we're working with families that are working with the child protection system. We have 45 vouchers, and that program stays pretty full. We were a little overutilized with that program in 2023, and so we're able to, when one family goes off, we just won't take another referral. So we're pleased with where we ended up with the special purpose voucher program in 2023. We talk a lot about turnover vouchers, and you've heard us say that turnover vouchers serve many purposes on our program, including waiting list applicants, so selecting people from the waiting list, initially filling project-based voucher units, so when a building comes on, we have to fill those units, which take turnover vouchers. When a PBV participant lives in a project-based unit for 12 months, they can request a tenant-based voucher to move to a location of their choice, and so turnover vouchers are used for that purpose. And then, of course, absorbing vouchers from other housing authorities. And when people move to our service area from other parts of the region, the state, or even the country, when they arrive here, we can either absorb them into our own program, taking one of our turnover vouchers, or we can bill that other housing authority. So we don't want to absorb them because it takes our turnover vouchers, but staffing capacity and the administrative burden of billing requires us to absorb. So in 2023, we had 830 turnover vouchers. Of those turnover vouchers, these are the reasons people went off the program and how we use those vouchers. And so that green bar on the far left are the number of absorbs that we did to our program. So you can see that's the largest use of turnover vouchers and was almost 250 vouchers in 2023. 2021 was sort of an anomaly year where the number of absorbed was much lower, and I think it was just the height of the pandemic. Housing authorities weren't absorbing, and neither were we. So, but pretty consistently, the second reason becomes voluntary drop. So those are people that are just saying, I want to go off the program. Sometimes we know the reasons, sometimes we don't. The third bar there is expired vouchers, and so these are vouchers that are in the hands of people that expire before they use them, and it could be that they moved out of the area, they no longer need it, or they couldn't find a landlord to accept their vouchers. So a variety of reasons that vouchers expire. Program violation is that fourth darker green bar, so people that have violated the program rules, so lost their voucher. Deceased is self-explanatory. Over income is for families that their income becomes more than the rent. So if 30% of their income becomes more than their rent, they have 6 months where we can monitor their income such that if it goes back down, they can come back on the program. But these are families that have reached the 6 months at zero subsidy payment. And then we have a small number of evictions. There was a little uptick in 2023 with the number of evictions, and we associate that with the lift of the eviction moratorium that's catching up, but still a relatively low number. And then we had a higher number of no reason listed, so we didn't have a reason given for somebody that went off the program, or one of our staff person didn't populate that field in our system, so we're working on getting that corrected for 2024.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question?
Yeah,
before we
please,
move on
Councilmember
from this?
Wolf.
So the program violations were lower in 2020 and 2021, and then we have higher numbers for 22 and 23, but that's not a very long span of years. Is it going up and becoming more of a problem, or is it more of a up and down and we just don't have very many years going back?
You know, it's really a relatively slow or low number. So in 2020, it was 62 households, 2021 was 71, 2022 was 89, and then 2023 was 69.
118 and 116.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah,
Yeah,
I was
that's
looking
the
at.
green.
The green one, sorry about that. 69, 71, 118, and 116. And when we're serving almost 7,300 families, that's a really small percentage. I would say it's just anomaly. I don't know the explanation of that, but I could certainly check into that. I don't know if Chong has a sense of that.
I think it may be related to the eviction moratorium. At the time, we were processing of inspections. We, what would you call it? We pushed off some
Skipped.
inspections. And then now we are back in the normal processing.
Okay.
Yeah, and so sometimes
point.
program violations can be not completing their annual recertification, not completing the required annual inspections.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Cool.
Good question.
Yeah, Ms.
Thanks,
Smith.
Chong. And then we hired a new manager in 2023. So Chong, she's been with us, but she switched roles, and Chong is now our manager of quality assurance. So our program numbers are growing, the complexity of our programs has increased over time. We have more project-based vouchers. We essentially have more rules to follow. So we just really need more monitoring and more quality assurance, which is Chong's new role. She's done some really great work in 2023 that she's gonna share with you in the upcoming slides.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
I will be providing a project-based voucher update for 2023 and onward to 2024. With with project-based vouchers, the Metro HRA does not receive additional vouchers to PBV. What happens is that PBVs are taken out of our voucher pool. HUD allows housing authorities to project-base up to 20% of its eligible vouchers. Metro HRA has a total of about 7,283 vouchers, and of these vouchers, 6,865 are eligible for project basing. The current adopted council policy in the administrative plan is that we would project base up to 20% of our vouchers. And if you take a look at the pie chart, currently 15% of our vouchers are PBV, and that's 1,010. 363 are the available vouchers that we could PBV if we were to go to offer an award. In 2023, last month, we came to the council for approval of the project-based voucher offer and award. We awarded 32 project-based vouchers, 20 mainstream project-based vouchers awarded to Botany Ridge Phase 2, Gladstone, PPL BC Family Housing, and an additional 12 BASH project-based vouchers were awarded to Carver Oaks Senior Residence and Note River Place. Currently under construction right now is Vista 44 with 50 units of project-based voucher with a estimate completion of summer 2024. In 2023, We completed an internal compliance review. We notified our partners that we would be reviewing all of our PBB contracts and unit information. This totaled 55 contracts were audited with 978 PBB units reviewed. What we learned were that there were long-term vacant units, about 43 units over 6 months vacant. Our utilization rate for the PBB program in 2023 were under 90% utilized. Our wait list was not, in some cases, being used to fill units, or that they were filled incorrectly. So what that means is that the units were filled in the open market, and the tenant residing there is not receiving housing assistance. So for that project, I'm currently working with the owner to determine eligibility for those 2 units to come on board. We also learned that there are many misunderstandings of the PBB program, how the program works and operates, and there are also many staff turnover, property management changes, many lost knowledge with the transition. Some projects are doing great and some not so much. Example, there's one project, 101 units, and as of February, they have no vacancies, 101 units. There's one project not doing so great, 39 units, and as of February, 15 vacancies. And so it's a mix. And we're working closely with the projects to review what is it, what are the challenges that they are facing, and what can we do to help. Let's see here. And the property that has the 15 vacancies went through property management changes and some challenges with their service provider.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, question from Councilmember Johnson.
how often, again, maybe you mentioned it, how often do you audit and do your internal compliance reviews? Or are you just doing segments every year to get, how do you, what is your cadence on that?
Ms. Lau.
Thank you, Councilmember. I would say this is our first year that we've ever really dug into every contract to do a full review and audit. And so I reviewed all exhibits confirming that the units we have on contract are units that we are currently serving in assistance. And so every month, I'm actually looking at the vacancy numbers as well to monitor how many are coming on board that are vacant and reaching out to properties to see, hey, I see an uptick in vacancies. And there is one project that I'm meeting on a regular basis. And one project, we went out on site last week to help with paperwork and the lease-up process. And so it's been an ongoing monthly review.
Okay, and Mr. Chair, just briefly,
Johnson.
and Councilmember Lee might be able to help here, but does this hit our internal audit committee ever? Because, internally we audit and manage our systems and how we report things out, and if there are issues with that, is this separate and audited externally and not internally? Or-
Yes, this is, Councilmember, this is separate. This is our process internally to review, making sure that all of our paperwork is in order, contracts, and really seeing where we can also help and maintain, increase our utilization rates as well with the PBB units.
And Mr. Chair, I guess I'm just asking then, do you report internally to our audit division here at the council to just let them know that the work that you're doing, so that is just something, just like all the other departments have audits that take place on their practices, procedures, and when they do things, to make sure we're compliant?
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Johnson, this program, the project-based voucher program, because it's such a small number of our program, it's audited in conjunction with the internal auditors.
Okay.
As part of our large program. And when you look at 43 vacancies, we have, 7,300 vouchers and have 43 vacant. I don't want to say the feds don't care, but, in the big spectrum of things, it's 43 vacancies out of 7,300. So we're really doing it from an internal lens to make sure that the resources that we've awarded to project-based vouchers are being utilized, because, and Chong's going to share some of this and the upcoming slides, but you have a good point. I mean,
And that was my
yeah.
point, so that, regardless of what externally is required of us, the
Yeah.
work that you're doing, I just want to be is either officially being acknowledged that it's taking place or just somehow, I mean, you're doing it here, obviously. I just didn't know if it was ticking a box within internal audit as part of the bigger picture. But it's great that you're doing it. I applaud you for doing it. And you know, we do have to care about every voucher. So thank you for this work.
Yeah, and Councilmember Johnson, Director Barajas would like to comment.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, council members. I think maybe part of the, yes, audit is always a part of this work, but I think more appropriate maybe is that we should be talking about this ongoing ongoing contract work as our monitoring and oversight like we do in our grants programs across that. So that's really akin to what Chong is doing. And, you know, when we first start it starts as like a big audit, but then turns more into just like our grant contract monitoring is that oversight and relationship building.
Great, and I just support you to institutionalize that as people come and go and come and go. And I think that's where I'm trying to go. Where does it sit where we'll know that in 5 or 10 years it continues on? That was, I should have probably started with that succinct statement, but I got maybe there eventually. So thank you, Lisa, for that extra clarification.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any further questions while we're paused? Seeing none, Ms. Lau.
Thank you. And with the internal compliance review, we are implementing, corrective action plans. And we began to implement corrective action plans. By implementing the corrective action plan, it is Metro HRA's commitment to moving the project into compliance with federal regulations and unit occupancy expectations. With the corrective action plans, they included individual meetings with owners and property managers, really looking at referrals and utilization goals specific to each project, and really a commitment to action. Example, do you think that you can get 2 referrals in each month to try to maximize the assistance or utilize the assistance? Just being realistic with what's going on with the property and what we can help with to increase that. Let's see, excuse me. And also the program regulations and HAP contract state that if any contract units have been vacant for a period of 120 or more days since owner notice of vacancy, the PHA may give notice to the owner amending the HAP contract to reduce the number of contract units. And so with the internal compliance review, looking at long-term vacancies, in 2025, we will begin to remove PBB units from PBB HAP contracts. This is before any removal, we will be engaging with the owners, making sure we have supported them, provided any resources, and offered any assistance that we can. And I monitor the vacancies on a monthly basis and have been reaching out and meeting with our owners on a regular basis. And again, this is, we want to make sure and maximize and utilize our scarce resources. If unfortunately, if we're not able to successfully lease a PBB unit, that the removal of the PBB unit will give another opportunity for someone else who's on our housing choice voucher waitlist to be able to utilize that voucher to rent to a unit of their choice. Last month, we held a PBB owner workshop, and we provided an operational overview for all PBB owners and property managers. We explained the difference between PBB and HCV, really general program rules and information, how units are filled, our quality control efforts, the removal of PBB units. We also talked about our upcoming inspired changes with inspections and provided an opportunity for a quality or a Q&A session. We had over 61 owners and managers attend, and also in attendance, 3 council members. Councilmember Diego Morales, Councilmember Tony Carter, and also Councilmember Dr. Tyrone Carter were present. It was a great event, and we were able to connect with our partners and received great feedback on improving processes and really a great day of engagement.
Yeah, kudos to Chong for putting together a great workshop. We had so many comments after the workshop from owners that got so much out of it. So I just think, as turnover and staff, just understanding the rules is important. And so kudos to Chong for our first annual owner workshop.
Thank you. Well done.
And So 2024, we have some really big things happening in the HRA. We have a Housing Opportunities Through Modernization Act. That was a 2016 law that was passed by Congress, and HUD is now just issuing implementation notices on that. But there are sweeping changes to our program in terms of the way we calculate rents for tenants, and so we will require new training for our staff. Policy revisions, you're going to see lots of changes in our admin plan this year due to HOTMA implementation, software changes, and then educating tenants and landlords. The second one is sweeping changes to the way we inspect units. So for the Housing Choice Voucher Program, currently we use what's called housing quality standards since the beginning of time for the voucher program. The public housing standards are Real Estate Assessment System, REAC. Real Estate Assessment. REAC, Real Estate Assessment, anyway, REAC, that's public housing standards, but Inspire is HUD's idea to merge those programs. So there's one inspection standard nationally for the federal subsidy programs. And it's quite complicated because there are some big changes to that. And ultimately, we're ensuring that our tenants are living in units that are healthy and safety units for them. But it requires system changes, training of staff, training of landlords and tenants. So it's a heavy lift. We have the statewide rent assistance program coming, Bring It Home. That was part of the legislative package last year. We're working closely with Minnesota Housing and industry partners on program guides, and we'll be preparing for implementation of that program for January 1st. We do plan to come forward with information item and an action item for you later when we know more about it, but we do there's options to administer those vouchers like the Housing Choice Voucher Program. We can also do project-based voucher. We can develop new program initiatives. So it's a really exciting opportunity to do some different and creative things. So we're excited to bring more information on that before you. But we have the opportunity to get 1,000 to 1,100 more vouchers starting January 1st. So that's another heavy lift. We do intend to sell 5 council-owned housing units and purchase replacement units. You all approved that way back in 2022, and we finally got the HUD approval to do that. So we'll be working with the real estate office to get that done. We have some fun, exciting opportunities to do some exploration of homeownership and wealth building this year. We have an intern that we've hired that will be working with our outreach team to do information gathering on those 2 initiatives. And then we're also doing some website updating and online tool development. For example, for the new Inspire inspection standards, our inspection team worked with the communications and produced a video to help landlords and tenants understand what the big changes are coming. So we're going to be doing several of those online tools to get ready for these big program changes. So those are some heavy lifts in 2024. And the reason we share all that is that it's important that we allocate our 2024 resources very carefully and place the urgency on these new program initiatives that are coming. 3 big ones all at once is a lot. And so, and we also, with Chong's work and the compliance with PBVs, it's important that we get our PBV contracts in order before we offer any more. So we're not intending to offer any project-based vouchers this year. We shared that at the PBV owner workshop, and actually it was received pretty well. We didn't get any feedback on it from owners and developers, although we know they want vouchers. But I just think there's not time to do that this year. We do have some opportunity to explore that option with the statewide rental assistance, so we'll bring that before you at a later date. And we just really want to set up our team and our work for future success. And with that, Mr. Chair, well, we're happy to answer questions.
Yeah, thanks, Ms. Smith, Ms. Lau, for this report, for your work. Thanks to your teams as well. And I just really want to congratulate you on your high utilization, your high ability to actually expend the resources that HUD sends us. And I know that federal HUD programs like this and specific are very heavily regulatory and a high level of compliance work. And so really, I want to applaud you on that. And I think Terri said something, HUD doesn't really care about 40 units. I know, well, you said you can't say that. I know
Right.
that we can't say that, but I do think when you look at your utilization numbers, the incredible compliance we have here, that any kind of deviation like that isn't really considered major. So congratulations to you for this work. And I know we have a massively huge HRA, and so you're doing the council very proud on this work. So thank you. Questions? Yeah, Councilmember Lee.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, Terry, can you please expand on what the new HOTMA rules might mean for, in terms of if we're going to do differently the way we calculate rent? Is that just a new administrative issue that we have to deal with, or will that also affect who we serve?
I'm going to have Chong take that because she's taken the HOTMA training and I haven't, but
Yeah,
if
definitely.
it's okay, Chong.
Councilmember. There are many changes in the way that income calculation will be looked at. HUD is really, in prior years, they didn't allow us to, for example, to use the enterprise income verification, the EIV report, to project income calculation. And now they are allowing us to use that and calculate using the last 12 months. They are also making some changes to medical expenses in terms of what the limit is. And also, they removed the earned income disallowance, disregard. And so there are many changes, and this is the largest changes that have happened and that we can recall for the HOTMA changes.
There's like increased deductions for disabled families went from 480 to 600 or something.
They are looking at changing the deductions now based off of the cost of living. And so for the disability deduction, it's been 400 forever for each household. So now that will be adjusted based on the cost of living.
Thank you.
So it won't impact Councilmember Lee and Chair Lilligren. Tenants will still pay about 30% of their income towards rent. It's just calculated a little bit differently. There are some different asset calculations. And so it's just retraining the people that we serve and our teams to do things differently. HUD has different reporting systems that we will be required to have our software changed to comply with those new HUD reporting systems as well.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Further questions or discussions on the HRA 2023 in review and the 2024 work plan? Seeing none, thank you very much, Ms. Law, Ms. Smith, for that work and for the report. We'll move on to our next information item, which is draft land use policies, actions for Objective 1, Objective 3, and Objective 6. Ms. Torres is here to present. And committee members will recall that we've been looking at different parts of the draft land use policies at our CDC meeting. So we're on 1, 3, and 6 today. Ms. Torres, welcome.
Thank you so much. I wouldn't have ever made it through the presentation without my water, so thank you for the moment.
Self-care.
So, good afternoon, committee members and chair. I don't know if I need to continuously introduce myself, but I'm Angela. It's good to see you again. I'm here today to continue our ongoing and evolving discussion on land use policy. So as you saw in the staff report, we shared a lot of information with you in preparation of today's discussion. Part of that was a Thrive analysis and draft language for 3 land use of the 3 of the 8 land use objectives. We'll wrap up today then with a few questions for discussion and next steps. If I sound like I'm probably going to give themes and big picture on a lot of the slides, I'm trying to be cognizant of my colleagues in the audience and try and work through this really important conversation in an abbreviated time. However, this is not the last time we will be here and talking about this, so I appreciate your attention. I always like to start with a foundational slide, ground us where we have been before, because every conversation that I'm here in front of you builds on our last conversation. We have, I'll start even on the second column, we have talked about land use objectives, we have talked about land use policies, and we're here today to talk about those policies paired with actions. I wanted to share this discussion questions with you so you can reflect as I'm sharing information with you. Are the approaches going in the right direction? Do you see anything missing? Should any of the existing approaches be reevaluated? And I'm happy to have that conversation today. I very quickly got us to the land use objectives, so here we go. This is the comparison actually of land use direction. Thrive has 7 policy statements. Imagine 2050 has 8. I've shared a comparison so that you can better understand where policy stands now and where things may be shifting. Here we can see an evaluation of the land use direction. I won't go through each of these as I mentioned, but point out just a few structural pieces. There isn't a direct equivalent for the objective related to community well-being and safety, which I've noted. Also in Thrive, natural systems, then referred to as natural resources, was separated out into natural environment and water resources. In Imagine 2050 language, the shift is to natural systems with a more ecological approach and recognizing all living things. Moving away from natural resources, which can be viewed as an extractive kind of language, more so than a holistic perspective. So I should mention, Imagine runs on the top row. Thrive MSP language runs on the bottom row in green. Try to group each of them through themes, so growth management, transportation, community well-being and safety, natural systems on this slide, and then on the next slide, housing, equitable development, climate resilience, and economic well-being. So
Ms. Torres,
again,
I have a question from
Yeah, sure.
Councilmember Johnson.
Yeah, if we could just go back to slide 5. And some of us who are on the 2050 work
Sorry.
group. On 5.
Is this 5?
Sorry.
One more.
We'll go forward. It's the 2020, the Imagine above the
The
Thrive
slide numbers in the
slide.
corner.
There you go.
Yeah, so we've been working on this in our work group chaired by Councilmember Carter. He's doing a great job. And, you know, I appreciate that we're moving this along, really good work here. And I brought up some concerns under natural systems and some of the language there, because there's tension in some of this work we're doing, right? And I think we need to figure out how people can resolve the tension, who are the readers of this that will be implementing it within their own plans. So when we ensure, that means we're gonna make it happen, that development activities contribute to the fullest protection and restoration of natural systems on every level. That's a lot of definitive words, like we're gonna do this on every level to the fullest. And I'll just tell you from somebody, again, who was on a city council for almost 20 years or so, there was a lot of competing on do we develop and put houses in? I know the trees are gonna come down, the old growth in Plymouth, we had to stand to that. We knew that we have 4 water sheds, 1 water district, 3 water sheds. I mean, it's a lot. And then try to do affordable housing. And this is what you get from the neighbors who read this stuff and go, we don't want this because it says you're gonna do these things. We've had some of that on recent plans from St. Paul on Grand Avenue. So I just wanna be sure that these can be folded into our other priorities without sounding like they conflict. Because I will just say that when people are looking to oppose something or support something, they will dig into our documents and put them back on us. And we heard some of that tonight, and we hear it all the time, right? So I want to be very careful, and I have expressed this. So there's that. When we jump to the first one under growth management, I think that, again, is on land use, it's very interesting, and that's a Minnesota word. You know, of course, respect the relationship with land and water as a foundation for regional growth. Is there nothing else that we would, for growth management, is that the only foundation, I guess I'm asking? I guess I'm just trying to understand what what went into I mean, people are a foundation of why we're growing, opportunity, other things that are naturally occurring in the environment, whatever. I feel like that's a departure from even our core mission as a Met Council. I won't get too deep into this because we're going to get to do this on Wednesday morning. And I've pre-read some of this. So I just am not comfortable where we're going in some of these high-level directions for our 2050 plan. I'm not saying they're not well-intended and they're not meaningful and they're not correct, but I think as high-level statements, growth to me, management is really talking over here to natural systems, and I think growth management seems like it should include something beyond that. So I just wanted to put that in the record. I don't really think it'll change anything in the process, because these words have been rolling around out there a little bit, and we'll look at them again on Wednesday, but I don't know. I just really wanted to say that.
Yep, I appreciate your comments, and also you're going to the discussion questions that are at the end of this, and
Yeah.
so maybe as chair, I should have deferred the discussion.
Well, also,
So,
I just-
but
the
Councilmember
chair's
Carter is,
here,
yeah.
so I just wanted
We
to-
appreciate your
that.
work, and so, yeah, thanks for your input. And Councilmember Carter, did you want to make a comment?
I
know you have to
did,
leave.
unfortunately, I'm going to be leaving out to head over to the garage, but I wanted to just share the thought and note that we have been talking primarily a lot about balance. And, while we're looking at this particular area of work right here, we continue to back in the Regional Development Guide work group talk about the need for balance. So even as we iterate our primary goals and the work that we're doing, and it looks this way in this particular area, everything is connected to everything. So in the discussion here, and of course in our RDF group as well, we'll continue to talk about that balance. So that's all I wanted to say as I pop out of here.
Thank
Hear
you.
you.
Thank you.
We'll continue that
Yeah.
work.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you, and I know Councilmember Wolf wants to comment, but I would also say thank you, Councilmember Carter, for your leadership on this and for participating tonight in that. Not every time we see this presentation will it have incorporated all of the comments that come out of the work group, come out of this committee, come out of the broader council conversation, but we will see those evolutions as we go forward. And so I don't know, Ms. Torres, if you want to validate what I just said or, or negate it, and then I'll go to Councilmember Wolf.
Yes, thank you, Chair Lilligren. Definitely, it's a constantly evolving piece of work. And, I said even later on in my presentation, the circles and the half moons are, I heard your feedback, they're not changed yet either. So I appreciate your comments. And another thing that we're trying to do is to also balance the feedback that we receive from all of you with local government's feedback, with the community organizations that we have been really intentionally engaging, the youth engagement that we did last year as well. And it's hard to kind of find that middle ground sometimes. I will say that the young leaders and the community organizations, the residents of the region, tend to focus a lot more on the natural systems, preserving those things during the development process, and this language probably reflects that. However, I did speak with Eric earlier today, and he already said this language is changing, so we'll see what the next iteration
It's
brings.
concerning to me, and I've raised it
I hear you.
before, and I'm just expressing what I think a lot of local leaders looking at this, especially as they're under assault at the legislature right now to strip them of their zoning rights. So, if you want affordable housing to be made easier, or flip side, you don't care about affordable housing, you want natural systems, it's a statement that people will read, and it brings a lot of concern for me.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for giving us the old language and the new proposed language. In some of them, I think the 2040 is actually easier to understand than what we have for 2050. Like the growth management thing of aligning land use development patterns and infrastructure to make the best use of public and private investment. speaks more to growth management than the proposed language about respecting the relationship with land and water. There's some others too. I don't know how deep in the weeds we're supposed to go or.
Well, we do have some questions that I think, we're answering already, but I don't think we're gonna get through the presentation. If we could-
And I just think, that's why I asked Mr. Chair if you.
No,
wanted-
I didn't realize where we were headed. Since the discussion questions are at the end of the presentation, Ms. Torres, I figured that must be when you were hoping we would have more of this kind of conversation.
Whichever you prefer.
Yeah, so I think, let's move through, you've heard good input that's already getting to the answering your questions. And so let's continue to move through the presentation and see if we can make it. Ms. Torres.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. Again, I won't go through these individually, but you can see that the equitable development objective in Imagine 2050 doesn't have a direct equivalent in Thrive. This gives kind of an idea of the subtle shifts in profession as well. In addition, you can see under housing, the language shifts from housing options to housing opportunities. That's part of the language of the professionals these days, is my understanding. Not being a housing person, but that's what we heard from feedback from our colleagues. Just wanted to provide a little bit of comparison of the themes and policies as well. New themes include bringing an Indigenous perspective to policy work and suggestions on how partnerships with both tribal nations and urban Indian organizations can be rebuilt. Occasionally, equitable development practices support this shift in, additionally, equitable development practices support this shift in focus to people, residents, and community benefits rather than public-private benefits. So making it a little bit more individual focused, which is probably why you see this shift in some of that language, really trying to bring in that individual perspective. We've been discussing over the last several months with you, with council members on the RDG working group as well, and with LUAC members, new approaches to growth management, including changes to considerations for density calculations. Re-emerging ideas include using a rolling land supply, considering density increases, and establishing criteria for MUSA expansions. All three have been a part of the council's policy structures in previous planning cycles and may make sense to reemerge. These are all same or similar themes between Thrive and Imagine, none of which should really be surprising. You can see the emphasis on maximizing investments, promoting compact development, directing growth where infrastructure already exists. They're all consistent between both policy areas. Also, you may know that the MUSA boundary for the 2040 plans, which is Thrive, didn't change from the 2030 MUSA boundary, and we know that regional growth can still be accommodated within that same MUSA boundary. So again, the 2040 MUSA boundary is proposed to be the 2050 MUSA boundary, so that again is a carryover practice from Thrive. The regional plan has set density expectations by community designation or a similar name. Sometimes they change the names of it for some time. Minimum densities within the MUSA and maximum densities in the rural service areas. And natural systems also have similar approaches where there's a focus on protection, prevention, and safety, although some of the terminology may have shifted. As a reminder, we have 8 draft land use objectives. We'll be going through objective 1, 3, and 6 today. This gets us to objective 1. You'll see this slide with each of the objectives, just refreshing your memory about our conversations on regional goals as well as the purpose and desired outcomes, which we walked through in the previous meeting with you. I'll skip to the next one where we're talking about policy 1 and 2. So there are 5 proposed policies for objective 1, which states respect the relationship with land and water as a foundation for regional growth. This objective includes many of the council's regulatory responsibilities and is the one where we've been spending a lot of time with you on throughout the year. Policy 1 refers to incorporation of Indigenous perspectives in the management of land and water sources. As we continue to work with the Native community, we may see changes here as the Council's land and water acknowledgement evolves. Policy 2 gets at the efficient use of land and maximization of infrastructure investments already in place. Here is where I mentioned you'll see some of the conversations about rolling land supply, density, and municipal expansion show up later. This is the more detailed piece, and I'll pause after the next slide so that we can get into discussion about this specific objective and its policies. Policy 3, 4, and 5 get at protection of agricultural areas, maximization of the existing built environment, and protection of natural systems during development. Many actions under Policy 3 can be seen in Thrive as well, except that there may be a more pronounced support for urban ag, a shift in protection of prime ag lands, and where solar developments might make sense. Policy 4 gets at maximizing the existing built environment by encouraging use of things that are already in place, so adaptive reuse of buildings, as well as using some of the data sources which we already developed, the annual building permit survey, for example, to see how we can measure and track redevelopment. Policy 5 directs growth away from sensitive ecosystems to prioritize protection of natural systems and gets at groundwater contamination, water supply constraints, protection of water during the development process, and local plans identifying safe drinking water. So with that then, Chair, I'll pause for a moment, see if there's any specific questions on Objective 1. I know we've been talking about it in a lot more granular detail than you're seeing today over the past several months.
Thank you, and I see Councilmember Wolf requesting the floor, but just to be clear, sort of from process here, Ms. Torres. So this is the time to, for us to look at Objective 1 that you just presented and consider the questions that you have on slide 22, correct? Thanks. So I would direct committee members' attention to the 3 questions on slide 22 as we move into this next phase of discussion. So the questions are: new approaches to policies going in the right direction? Are there concerns about existing approaches or lack of new approaches in any areas? And are there current approaches that shouldn't be carried forward? Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Under Policy 2, the part about new connections to the regional system meet the community designations minimum density. We talked a little bit about that in LUAC last month, that if you're meeting the rules, if you're not wanting, not dipping below the overall density, not every connection should have to have 3 units per acre, because communities put apartments or townhomes in some parts of the community and single family, maybe in another part. And if you say everything's got to be at least 3, there's no incentive for a community to do any apartments, because they could just do the whole city at 3 and say, we're done. So having each connection work that way, I think runs actually counter to what we would like to happen. If a community is chronically running below, then that's maybe a way to deal with it. But for communities that are doing what they're supposed to do, we shouldn't be micromanaging the density at every connection, is what I'm trying to say.
100%.
Thank you, Councilmember Wolf. Do you have a comment, Ms. Torres, on that, or?
Chair and committee member, you might see in the staff report some of the other things where we're pairing them with flexibility, and we're looking at performance-based approaches to do exactly what you just said.
Okay.
Thank you, excuse me. Further responses to the questions? Oh, Councilmember Wolf. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Have we talked with the tribes on whether they want all of that stuff in Policy 1? Because I've been hearing that to some degree, everybody's been asking them their opinions on stuff to the point that they're like, you know what, we're talked out right now. And I don't want to create tension of that we're asking too much.
Do you have a comment, Ms. Torres?
Chair and committee member, as we, that reflects specifically conversations that we had with Wakantipi as we were looking at environmental justice language and their desire to, well, I believe that, how do I say this? The land is a relative, sorry, I'm going to get this wrong. They view the land as a relative, and they would like to just be able to take care of their relative without all of us getting in the way. So if we were to have regional guidelines on land management practices for open areas, green spaces, in areas where the council has ownership or influence, I think that would get at what they were trying to do if those land management practices are informed by the Native perspective. And so I would say yes. Obviously, when we're engaging with the Native community, we do compensate them. And so hopefully over time, working on rebuilding some of those really fragile relationships, we can earn trust and we wouldn't be asking too much of a partner in that respect.
In Councilmember Wolf, if I can comment, I really appreciate your bringing that up. I think it was actually here that I once heard some elected tribal leadership say, listen, you got to understand, everyone wants to talk to us and there's very few of us to talk to. And I really commend Ms. Torres and the Community Development Division for trying to figure out how to shape that conversation so that it can be as useful not just to the tribes. And one of the issues that I know Angela's heard me bring up plenty is that we have 11 federally recognized tribes within the state of Minnesota. We have a consultation policy with those tribes that was mandated by executive order here, which great. And in that, we tried to, at least I tried to find some way to really acknowledge the fact that there are representatives of hundreds of tribes living within the metro area that don't have the privilege and protections of a government-to-government relationship with us. Yet, they're still our constituency. And so this Native Partnership Group is being formed, and we're gonna ask those kinds of questions. How would this work best? And then I think to Ms. Torres's point, this larger perspective or this higher level perspective of moving forward, respecting the position, the beliefs and the perspectives of the first people of this land being reflected in a policy document. And we'll see where that goes. I don't think there's an answer yet, but I think it's going to be an interesting process to find out, to answer your question that you just asked, Councilmember Wolf. I think it was exactly the right question.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Councilmember Johnson.
And as long as we're talking about water and regional systems, will the issue that we ran into with the city of Jordan and the township issue recently, will that be addressed in the 2050 plan, or is that, as we talk, because I'm looking at orderly annexation and all the things, but we have to consider the regional system. So is that where some language
It's in here somewhere, in that big, long document.
Okay, great, great, that's all I needed to know.
Okay, all right, great, thanks.
Chair, I can confirm.
Please, Ms.
I can confirm
Yeah,
that we don't
Ms.
have the language just yet. We do have like a placeholder in there where we're looking at evaluating the impacts of growth around rural centers as it relates to our regional systems. And so we don't have the language probably just right yet, but we do have kind of a policy that's holding space.
Great, I think that's going to be key, that we're, issues like that have been identified through some of our decision-making can be addressed more fully in 2050. Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the rolling 20-year land supply, I want to make sure that we're working with communities that they believe that there's 20 years worth of land too, not just us, because if we keep the land too tight, then the prices go up for everybody, and then we don't have any affordable housing. We don't want to push people outside of the seven-county metro area for affordable housing.
Excellent point. Councilmember Johnson?
I'm worried that's already happening, but it might
Yeah.
not relate
Oh, it is,
to
yeah.
our constraining. It's just, it's a nutty market, hence the weird
Yes.
bills at the legislature. If I may, Mr. Chair, just a
Yeah,
quick.
please,
So do we have a glossary that goes with all of this? Because promote compact development, so compact elicits a lot of thoughts on what that means. So, you know, if you're Maple Plain, your city's built and the homes are, you know, and all the things, but if you're Corcoran, that is maybe something different that they're, and they might think, oh, that must mean like, you know, Minneapolis or Robbinsdale. Is there, that's just a triggering word for local officials. So is there a different word or a glossary that will help to, you know, when people pass through this thing, they'll kind of understand, you know, I think it, you know, I'm sure what we're trying to do is promote efficient development or, you know, I don't know, but compact sounds like we're trying to cram people into an area.
I wasn't quite sure what the word that was triggered, so it's compact.
Well, yeah.
Okay, got it. No,
It's not promoting or development, but it's the compact
Okay,
nature. of
thank
it. I
you.
just, you know, you're just gonna
Yeah,
get reactions.
no, good point.
And we use words that a lot of,
Cool.
People have a problem
And it
with
looks like Director Barajas wants to comment.
Oh, no, thank you, Mr. Chair, council members. Certainly a lot of the context for the policies will be in the document more. What do we mean by this? What does this mean in the different context of different community designations? Examples of that work that will then play out through our technical assistance of what does this look like in this setting versus this setting? And trying to provide those tools and visual guides in many ways, because a lot of folks, including myself, many times have a hard time visualizing what does this density actually look like in built in reality, and having those examples from across the region. We've got some staff on board this summer who will be helping with that too. So a lot of that will help to illustrate things that we can't always just explain.
okay, that's great. It's hard to react to this then without the drop-down menu of what it means. You know what I mean? So I'm sure that you'll have all those things that will allay any concerns. And I'm sure it'll be fabulous. I'm just giving you some high-level reactions to some of the words here. And it's a pretty significant departure from former iterations, and not that we shouldn't change, and we definitely have different priorities in the 2050. But some of these are just carryover words that have a lot of connotations
Baggage.
to them, yes.
Yeah, I
And I'm
appreciate it.
trying to make sure that this fresh approach doesn't have a lot of baggage.
And I would
words.
know, I'm guessing, and maybe Ms. Torres can confirm this, but this is the kind of feedback that you were looking for, right? This is, so I think it's helpful. Councilmember Wolf?
Thank you, Mr. The important thing is that we have choices available to people all across the spectrum, except for 3-acre lots.
Well, appreciate it. And again, I think this was the kind of discussion that these questions were designed to prompt. And I appreciate us having this opportunity to directly comment as we're going through on a momentous threshold of planning here, going for the Mansion 2050, right? And so it's great to engage the committee this way. I will say it takes time. And so I'm looking at our agenda, and I senses, and Councilmember or Director Bras, I don't think that we're going to get to the third and fourth information item, because I'm guessing the next two objectives will prompt at least this much conversation. So I see a core of parks folks out there who have been so patient. But I don't, and you can confirm, I think we should just stick with this for the rest of our agenda. And I don't want to give any short shrift to the regional development guide for the parks policy plan or to the LCA program. And I've been more involved in that conversation in a discussion with Director Barajas and Ms. Berkey. And I think folks on this committee are going to be satisfied that this process is going to be more inclusive, and especially communities that potentially haven't been engaged. But I want to give that the full time for conversation and maybe have a few more committee members here for that. So we'll postpone that. Yeah, so information items 3 and 4 will postpone to the next meeting, with my thanks for all the staff that hung in there this long for that.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Is this essentially the information we're getting on Wednesday morning? And you'll be in it and I'll be in it?
No, I'm not in that.
Oh, you're not gonna, aren't you on the 2050?
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh,
development
yeah, I am.
work? It was in our inbox today. So-
Yeah.
So if there's other business, I know I'll
I
be
don't-
getting it, but I
well,
don't, there's two other people here.
Parks
that-
folks are split, and I would, yeah. Ms. Torres, what do you?
Alternatively, we could just end at objective 1, and I could excuse myself and bring back objectives 3 and 6
Okay.
at the next meeting, and the Parks folks could then go right ahead.
Do you want to do the parks? I know that they have a very meaty presentation. If they spent a minute a slide, they still won't fit their presentation in before 6
I'm
o'clock.
willing to step back.
So what I would, if this works for you, Director Braz, is if we're going to do that, and I think, Angela, that there's validity there, I would rather go into the LCA 2025 program updated work plan. Because that just seems a little more current and like it's churning a little more right now. Is that cool with you guys, with the committee?
Whatever.
To go into that, and then we'll see you Wednesday morning. Thank you for that reminder, Councilmember Johnson. You know my schedule better than me.
No, sometimes, I'm in that boat too, trust me.
So, all right, so should we wrap up? Is that, this cool with you, Lisa? All right.
Yep. We can just conclude. One of the last things I like to, here, I'll just go to next steps. Lather, rinse, repeat is often what I say is like, we're going to be here many times. We'll be continuing to work with our other stakeholders. This week alone, we've got 3 presentations just on this. And so we're trying to get a lot of comments and then integrate those as quickly as we can. So working
appreciate
towards the
that.
end of May timeline for the preliminary draft.
And this will be back in front of you.
It will.
At this committee as well.
Right, and I really appreciate that, and I appreciate that this committee gets the opportunities to kind of, to react to this, to give you comments, just because of so many absences today and things like that. I don't know how rich this conversation is going to get into. Councilmember Johnson's point, the design guidelines, the regional design guidelines work group will meet on Wednesday morning and can kind of continue with this. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
Thanks very much. With that, we'll move on to what was on our information agenda as item 4, the proposed LCA 2025 program update work plan. Is that cool with you, Sarah? Okay, all right. Thank you. Thanks, Emmett, and to your team for your understanding. And Ms. Berkey, thanks for being here.
Yes. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I'm Sarah Berkey. I'm the Senior Manager for Livable Communities and Housing, and just here with hopefully a quick update on proposals for how we'll move forward on LCA program updates this year, and really want your input, so thank you for those of you who are here. Look forward to discussing and getting your recommendations. So for today, I thought we would propose some goals for what a program update that would begin in 2025 could look like for the LCA programs, talk about proposed roles and where we will get input into this process, and then have a discussion with you all on those topics. So doing decennial planning, it's normal, it's part of our process that we should update our work across all of our portfolio of our work to ensure consistency with regional goals. And with LCA programs, the LCA statute requires us to update LCA programs to be consistent with the Regional Development Guide. Additionally, as you all know, we've been having a lot of conversations about these programs for the last 2 years, certainly since I started in this role. And we've really heard that you're interested in ensuring greater participation in the program from communities across the region, that you would like to help reduce barriers to entry for communities, as well as for developers who haven't had the chance to participate yet. And so to make some updates to the program, we need direction on program goals. Those need to flow from our statutory guidance, which I just reference here, so you have it at top of mind. There are many goals in the Livable Communities Act, but these are those that really kick it off and that we can start with looking at least, which is that the council should establish criteria for LCA funds that are consistent with the entire article of the law, as well as the policies of the Regional Development Guide that's adopted by the council each 10 years, And the goals in the statute include living wage jobs, developing a full range of housing opportunities, preserving and rehabilitating affordable housing, and creating incentives for compact and efficient development. So there's that word again. And you're all very familiar with our Imagine 2050 process at this point and our goals that are under development now. So roughly, here's what we would propose as a start for discussion for the roles of the council and the committee in the process. Over the summer, approximately, we could have some member liaisons from this committee to listen in to focus groups and serve as a liaison back to the overall committee to incorporate the perspectives of different voices throughout the region that will engage. Also propose having a workshop session in lieu of a committee meeting or during a committee meeting time to help identify those connections to the regional goals that we need to consider in developing any changes to the program. And then we would, at the same time, begin the spring, hire a consultant to start to really pull together a lot of information, both from the engagements that committee members are involved in and with cities throughout the region and other stakeholders in the program. And by the fall, we would ask that consultant to synthesize the findings, provide a report to this committee, and identify some high-level recommendations for 2025 program implementation, as well as identifying some areas that maybe need more research and development and that we could work toward implementing in future years. So it's a tight timeline, but if this is successful, we would propose then to start to incorporate some of those recommendations into the 2025 LCA program plan, which you'll remember every year we approve in, begin talking about in December and then typically approve in January and February. The input into the program update would, we would seek out information from a lot of different sources and many different voices. So we would use our program data that we've assembled over the years here, actually have a new staff person that we hope to have on board soon to help us organize that data even better. We would reach out directly to inactive communities throughout the region who haven't participated or aren't actively in the participant status for the program. We already have some interview questions that we're drafting up now and planning to get started on that with staff. We'd have focus groups with participating communities, including Metro Cities has indicated a desire to work with us on some working sessions and to help co-host and facilitate some sessions. And we could also include other sources, surveys, other formats, depending on kind of how many voices we need to have represented in the room. We could iterate that a little over the course of the process. In addition to speaking with cities and counties and municipalities, we would reach out to developers throughout the region, including those that are more established, those that are emerging. And we would also really bring out a lot of the information we've already been collecting through engagement with communities throughout the Metro in the 2050 planning process. So we're already actively looking for those opportunities to connect that work into the program design. This has been a big conversation, so I think it's helpful to sort of think about what would a successful process look like? Where would we get in the course of the next 6 months to a year? For your consideration, I'd say it would be that the committee here agrees on the program goals for LCA. We have high-level policy goals already, of course, but because we have a limited amount of funding and we need to be able to differentiate among the different projects that apply for the funding, we need to be a little more specific with the goals of the program. And of course, they need to be consistent with all of our statutes and our policies as a council. And then we would want staff to be able to use those goals to go ahead and develop and refine programs for the year 2025 and then beyond. So I wanted to ask you all, thank you for staying through this long discussion tonight. Are the two goals we proposed here for the work, are those the right focus for this year? And then what other opportunities do you see for continued and better alignment of LCA programs with the Imagine 2050 goals? So the two proposed goals for the process are to ensure the alignment of program design with those new regional goals and to encourage broad participation from communities in the region and reduce barriers to entry for applicants. Do those feel right? Are we missing anything?
Thank you for your presentation, your work on this, and I would look to the regional meeting committee members for comments. Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The other thing that's not discussed here is the massive amount of money that's coming to cities and counties for their own new housing programs, and making sure that we're not duplicating what others are doing, but filling in gaps if there are some. If they see something that the new money won't cover, then us working on what's not otherwise covered would be a better use than just competing with what they might already be doing. And the challenge with aligning it with the regional goals for 2050 is we don't have them done yet, really. And we haven't done outreach much outside of haven't done a lot of outreach on the developing edge of the region or the places that would be having, green field development, and I don't want to miss that part of the conversation. They haven't really weighed in yet.
Great. Thank you. Did you want to comment, Ms. Berkey, or?
Sure, Chair and Councilmember Wolf, I'd just say certainly a gap analysis is a great idea, something we were already thinking should certainly be part of this process with the housing funds coming. And then I think there's some room for ongoing iteration back and forth. We think we know where the 2050 plan is going. If we're wrong, I think we'll have the flexibility to pivot a little along the way.
Thank you. And I have a question for you then about the state housing fund, the new resources that are coming in. And do we know, I know local communities, well, some are, aggressively planning for how they may use that funds. Do we know what a timeline on the local communities accessing those funds, spending those funds is going to be? Director Barajas is nodding.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, council members, I believe their first payment is meant to come out this second quarter of this year.
Yeah, I thought mid-year.
And then, and generally, I think it aligns with the local government and aid calendar when those payments come, if I recall correctly. But I can find that. It's directed in the statute itself.
I think that would be helpful. I think Councilmember Wolf is right. That would have an impact on how our resources may get used. And I think part of our policy conversation can be, are we going to fill gaps, or are we going to leverage and enhance the programs the local communities are already moving for? And so I wouldn't want to just embrace at this point this idea that we're just filling gaps. It may be because some of those resources to local communities are actually fairly limited, depending on formula. Yeah, Director Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just wanted to add to that too. There is legislation in this session as well that would provide some additional guidance for use of those funds. So it's still pretty evolving at this point. Certainly, we can do an analysis based on what we know today, and then that will probably change. Who knows, by the end of this session. So we'll continue to monitor that. But I imagine in the coming years as well that we will be monitoring the use of those funds to see how they actually are put into effect. And so this will change likely over time as well.
So, thanks, good points. And to the other point, we have on the sources of input for the program update, the box that says inactive communities. And I think we would benefit from being more specific, if there's if a way of convening these collar community or these communities that aren't necessarily inactive, but that aren't participating for whatever reason. I guess you could say that's inactive. But, this has just been an issue that's been brought up in this committee as long as I've been sitting here. So I feel like being really specific, here's that conversation, if that's its own box or something. But I think we would need to respond to the voices that have been bringing that point up in committee. So, yeah. And I'll just say this as well. I'm sorry, I'm hogging the floor right now. But I will also say, I don't mind that it's a tight timeline. I mean, we'll have to be very clear when we post for a consultant about what our expectations are and benchmarks and how we can move this through. But I have seen, just in my own perspective, sometimes I think often quick can be good. First thinking, processes don't need to be years long to be adequate, I guess is what I'm saying. And we've just seen since the last legislative session where we were given so many tight timelines to programmatize a new statute or a new funding source in a number of areas. Speed, I'm sure it's a huge strain. We need to make sure our staff is supported and that we have adequate staff to move as quickly as we may want to. I kind of like trying to moving quickly on this. We get to redo this every year, right? And so we can, we don't need this much process necessarily every year, but we can reestablish these program guidelines. And so, yeah, I welcome the abbreviated time. Councilmember Johnson, then
Yeah,
Councilmember Wolf.
thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate all of the things that have been said. As you do outreach, I would love to maybe combine with another district and have a couple council members invite our mayors and city planners and council members to come in and meet at somebody's community center or somewhere, because when I'm out hearing things, I want to be in the room when they're telling you those things, just to make sure that those connections are taking place, and I want them to know that I'm trying to advocate for them. I am trying to build trust and communication. We've had, I think when we meet out at Pig on the Porch every Wednesday a month, Met Council's come out and we've had really good presentations out there. But this is one where I think for some of my communities, I'm not sure they even think there's a reason to participate. So I just don't know if they would show up somewhere to say something when they are probably not feeling it right now. But I know that, you know, I could probably encourage them to come to something, and maybe another district next to me could encourage, and we could just have a real good listening and discussion around this and what they need to be successful, and it goes beyond LCA. So they got a lot on their minds. They have a lot that they're managing. They are stressed. There aren't enough workers. The legislature's coming for them, and they're just trying to, you know, build strong communities where people feel good about living there, and it's getting harder and harder. So I would like to see that. I know you guys are doing outreach all the time, and you know, I can't get to everything here, but if it's in my community and I know about it, I will be there. So I would invite that.
It looks like Director Rosman. So I agree. I think that these kind of focused conversations, I really think would be a great way to leverage relationships that council members have in districts. The one thing I would caution us about, Councilmember Johnson, I don't know that you were saying this, but yes, these communities may have a lot of opinions and feelings about the Met Council, but I feel like if we're gonna, here's one way of advancing those conversations. Yeah. I don't think we can burden the LCDA conversation.
I'm not talking about, I was just
okay,
simply talking about this program.
I just wanted to.
No, and my notation was that we've had Met Council come out and talk about, Deb Barber and Charles and Mayor Hovland, you know, came out and talked about the regional solicitation because they really didn't understand the process and they ate it up. Chair Zelli has come out and they loved it. Right. So more of that is good because,
agreed.
You know, and so this would be focused on this, but this is a priority, I think.
I agree. So I think it's a great way of using the local relationships that we have as council members. That's why we're here. That's why we represent districts. So I agree 100%. Director Barajas, did you want to comment? And then I'll go to Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. And making sure I'm reflecting that back, that kind of taking advantage of where people are already meeting, taking advantage of those as an opportunity to share more about the program. Definitely we can build that into that. And then kind of what Sarah had shared earlier, as well as we kind of convened this workshops with metro cities. We've also talked about this broad range of participants and not participating communities and different community types as well, but also would invite the committee members here too to think about, and I don't know, Mr. Chair, how you want to select folks, but think about who from this committee would want to be involved in that workshop process as well. That would be more and reaching a broader cross-section outside of your districts.
I appreciate that, and again, I will recognize Councilmember Wolf in a moment. And just kind of building on Councilmember Johnson's kind of suggestions, you know, is it a north-south geography? Is it east-west? But I think being really specific about the communities that we're trying to engage. And then I think you'll see that the council members who who bring up concerns about the lack of participation in some of the communities they represent, I think they would be the biggest draw. And they have the credibility amongst the communities to bring them to the table at least. And we'll see what happens. But at least if we build that into our plan in a very transparent way, then we can show communities that we're trying, right? We're hearing you, we're trying something different. And but in my, I feel we need to be that specific and deliberate within the outreach plan. Cool. Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would happily host a meeting with
Yeah.
cities in Dakota County and Scott County, you know,
Right.
that are likely candidates, because there's some cities, you know, if you have 87 people, like Nutri-Air, it's not going to happen.
Right.
But, you know, the cities that we could legitimately expect would be eligible, I would be happy to host something like that on a Friday morning or something.
Right. And maybe we could hit a couple of districts at a time or something like that. But
Yeah, because that would hit 4 districts if
Right.
we had that. But I also would volunteer to be one of the people that does all of these meetings.
Sure, appreciate that. And I think that, yeah, that's appropriate. And I know this is creating more work. Again, I don't mind a short timeline, but we need to be really clear as we post for this consultant. With something like what you were just talking about, I think would go a long ways to advancing the regional conversation on livable communities.
This week, I have meetings for 6 out of the 7 days.
Sure,
Yeah, me
Sure.
too. I'm
Right.
taking PTO.
But if that's what it takes to get information
To get
out
the
of
voices to the
people,
table, yeah.
I'm willing to do it.
I appreciate that. Cool. Cool. Let's see, I'm just going back. So can we just spend a minute? I know it's after 6. I really appreciate this conversation. I hope this is helpful. Ms. Berkey, Director Barajas. But then the other piece is the goals. And so we have the goals of encouraging broad participation. That's what we've been talking about, reducing barriers. The other, and we've heard some concern here about the alignment of program design with regional goals for Imagine 2050. And Councilmember Wolf, you've raised concerns about that, right? Yeah, and so to me, it makes a lot of sense that, I mean, the 2050 goals are being developed at as much alignment as we can create. I think it makes sense because it's newer thinking, newer approaches, and it'll be consistent. But if the others have either sort of pro or con positions to make, I think staff would appreciate hearing that now. Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My concern is that right now, those goals are very focused on areas that have transit and are fully developed and not recognizing more of the greenfield. And the statute talks about greenfield development too. And even in the outer parts of the region, there is redevelopment that goes on. And we should be encouraging those communities to apply as well, not just in the core. So I don't want to miss that region-wide perspective and the geographic balance, because it really is very, very focused on the inner part of Hennepin County and Ramsey County for the current applicants and successful projects in getting funded.
Cool. Any other thoughts on the alignment with Imagine 2050? Other thoughts? This discussion isn't over. Will we approve this RFP for the consultant, or you have authority? Okay, cool. All right. But we'll see it or something. Okay. All right. And any other questions, Ms. Berkey?
Just, I guess, Chair Lilligren, so that we could keep moving this forward and going out and seeking a consultant and everything. what's the best way to keep you all in the loop? Is it to come and make these informational presentations, or to, talk with a couple of committee members as liaisons, or, and we could discuss this further when it's not after 6 p.m. too.
Yeah, and it's not that far after, but and I apologize to everyone that we're keeping you late, but later. Let's put a sort of a plan together, right? And I think, we have Councilmember Wolf, for example, who's volunteered to participate in other conversations. That's the piece I feel like I really want to see in this plan. So we have Councilmembers Johnson, Wolf, just from comments she's made, I'm guessing Councilmember Barber.
I'm sure Vento will too.
Bento and Cedarburg, Councilmember Cedarburg. But I feel like, I think the council members who have expressed the most concern about communities that aren't participating, I would like them to see how that engagement piece is going to be reflected in the RFP. So for me, that could be emails, and it doesn't need to wait for another CD committee or be on an agenda. But I just really want to urge us to see it. I feel like the Imagine 2050 regional goals debate is going to continue. It'll be harder and maybe less necessary to reflect that in the consultant RFP. Maybe I'm missing something. But I feel like on this committee, even on the council, we're going to continue having that discussion. And as we go through the year, we're going to have more information about about Imagine 2050. So it may be easier to see how or if there should be alignment there. Cool. All right. Cool. All right.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, please, Director
Let me
Rojas.
just ask, when we are working on, putting together the workshop series with, to be co-hosted with Metro Cities and looking for council member participation, I know that we have one volunteer here today. Would you like us to work with you and kind of engaging the rest of the committee on
Let's do
pulling
that.
that?
The committee and even maybe beyond the committee. I don't know. We can discuss that. If it's better to limit it to committee members, I would be happy to participate, but I don't have the relationships in the smaller communities that other committee members have. So, and I don't know that, and we can continue to have this conversation, but if Metro Cities really has that level of engagement, so it might be sort of a Metro Cities track and a more direct outreach track. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I know we're kind of designing on the floor here, but
This is, Mr. Chair, is actually very consistent with what we have in the plan.
perfect. Good work. Anything else on this? Ms. Berkey, anything else you would like from us right now?
No, thank you. I would love to get the other committee members' perspectives when we have a chance in the future, but I really appreciate everyone's perspectives here tonight.
Appreciate that. And I think we might have a representative slice of the committee, the range of committee position here, but I agree. Cool. All right. Anything else? My thanks to the parks folks. Okay, they did all finally take off, and my apologies. We got through more than I thought we were going to get.
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, I think that, again, just given the nature of the work that we've got before us and the 2-hour limits that we have on ourselves, it's hard, right? So to your point, Sarah, about how to keep us in the loop, all I know is Michael is my new lifeline.
Sure. He was here until.
Yeah, he's not here right now. And I am buried in emails like everybody, right? So, and yet, I know community relations is trying to figure out a way to keep us informed. But if there could be like a list, or I could just join for the things I want, and it could be sent, I don't know. But I am just trying to stay as present-minded in things as I can and be helpful, because the worst thing is to get to the end of the process and then you go, oops,
Right.
we missed stuff. So that is not good. Anyway, I just want to thank y'all for your hard work. And I do have concerns with where we're going. I'm going to talk about them again on Wednesday. But my concerns are probably on the 0.05%, because those are the things that bubble up that you hear about, right? It's the top level stuff. There's a million good things that I'm going to be promoting and telling people about. But I'm just trying to smooth out edges where I see,
Great.
hear the voices in my head
Sure.
of people I
Oh, and the
represent.
design guidelines? Yeah.
Just on, and generally, just
Yeah.
LCA or
Sure.
design guidelines,
Sure.
or, there's just, I just think we're in a time where people are just pensive about what's coming at them in this weird world we're in right now.
Agreeing on the LCA programmatic stuff and design. I mean, this is what we said we were gonna do, right? We wanted to take a deeper look. We're doing that. I think you're gonna find commitment from from committee members to following through on this. I think you'll see a high level of engagement and interest by committee members. I could see there being sort of almost like a two-track approach where there's the, lack of a better word, the League of Cities, you know, and then the smaller communities as well. And I really want to see that deliberate outreach to those non-participating communities clearly iterated in this plan and process. Thank you. Anything else? All right, Michelle, you look like you're going to say something. Okay, seeing no further business before this committee, we're adjourned.